I never imagined that the last words I'd hear about my son would come in the form of a text message, cold, abrupt, and final. It was a gray Thursday morning when I finally gathered the courage to ask my daughter-in-law the question that had been haunting me for days. What time is the funeral? My hands trembled as I typed, my heart pounding with a mother's desperate hope for closure, for a chance to say goodbye. The reply came almost instantly, but it wasn't what I expected. Just 4 words. He's long gone now. For a moment, I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was reading. My mind raced, searching for meaning, for some sign that this was a misunderstanding or a cruel joke. But there was nothing, no follow-up, no explanation, just a silence. That felt heavier than grief itself. I felt the air leave my lungs, replaced by a cold, hollow ache that settled deep in my chest. How could she be so dismissive? How could she reduce my son's entire life and my pain to a phrase so empty and final? I tried to call her, but she didn't answer. I sent another message, pleading for details, for anything that might help me understand. But the only response was that same chilling indifference. In that moment, I realized that something was terribly wrong, not just with the way my son had died, but with the way my family had unraveled. I had no idea just how deep the betrayal would go, or how much it would change me. But I knew I couldn't let this be the end of my story or his. From the moment I first held my son in my arms, I felt a bond so fierce and protective it almost frightened me. He was my firstborn, the child who made me a mother, and from his earliest days we shared a closeness that felt unbreakable. I remember the way he'd curl up beside me on the couch, his small hand tucked into mine as we watched cartoons together. Even as he grew older, he never shied away from a hug or a whispered, "I love you." Mom and I cherished every moment, knowing how quickly childhood slips away. Our family wasn't perfect, but we were close. Sunday dinners were sacred, my husband, our 2 children, and I gathered around the table, laughing over stories from the week. My son was the peacemaker, always quick with a joke to diffuse tension or a gentle word when someone was hurting. He had a way of making everyone feel seen, and I often marveled at his kindness and empathy. Even as a teenager, when most boys pull away, he confided in me about his dreams, his fears, and even his first heartbreak. When he met his future wife, he was in college, full of hope and ambition. She was beautiful, confident, and seemed to adore him. At first, I was happy for him, relieved that he'd found someone who made him smile in that shy, boyish way I loved. She joined our family gatherings, and though she was quiet at first, I tried to make her feel welcome. I wanted to believe that our family would only grow stronger with her in it. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. My son started missing our Sunday dinners, always with a polite excuse. When he did come, he seemed distracted, his laughter more forced, his eyes darting to his wife as if seeking her approval. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her words were clipped, her tone cool. I told myself it was just an adjustment period, that she was shy or overwhelmed. But the distance between us grew, and I felt it like a physical ache. I tried to reach out, inviting them over for coffee, sending little texts to check in. But the responses were always brief, sometimes ignored altogether. My daughter noticed it too, whispering to me late at night that her brother seemed different, more withdrawn. I reassured her hand to myself that it was just the natural course of growing up, of building a new life. But deep down, I worried. I missed the boy who used to call me just to share a funny story or ask for advice. The real turning point came after their wedding. Suddenly, there were boundaries. I hadn't expected holidays spent with her family, decisions made without so much as a phone call. I tried to respect their independence, to give them space, but every attempt to connect was met with a polite but unmistakable wall. My son's visits became rare, his calls even rarer. When I did see him, he seemed tired, older somehow, as if carrying a weight he couldn't share. Looking back, I can see how the warmth of our family slowly faded, replaced by a chill I couldn't explain. I clung to memories of better times, hoping things would change, that my son would come back to me. But I never imagined just how far away he would go, or how much I would lose before I understood the truth. It started with the little things, so small at first that I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. The first time I noticed, it was at my birthday dinner. I'd spent the whole day cooking my son's favorite meal, hoping to recreate the comfort of his childhood. When they arrived, my daughter-in-law barely glanced at the table before announcing. She was on a new diet and couldn't eat anything I'd made. My son just shrugged apologetically, his eyes avoiding mine. I tried to laugh it off, but the sting lingered long after they left. After that, invitations I sent out for family gatherings were met with more and more excuses. We're busy that weekend. We have plans with friends. We're just so tired. I told myself they were newlyweds, that they needed time to build their own life. But the excuses piled up until I stopped asking altogether. My daughter Nella never called, never texted, and when I reached out, her replies were curt, almost dismissive. "We're fine. It's busy. Maybe another time." Each message felt like a door closing, and I found myself standing. On the outside, peering in, the tension seeped into every interaction. At Christmas, I bought her a thoughtful gift scarf in her favorite color. Or so I thought. She opened it, glanced at it, and set it aside without a word. My son noticed, but instead of saying anything, he just squeezed her hand under the table. I caught the gesture, and it felt like a warning. Don't make a scene. I swallowed my hurt and tried to focus on the rest of the family. But the joy I used to feel at these gatherings was slipping away. Conversations with my son became strained. Where he once shared everything with me, now our talks were short and surface level. I'd ask about his work, his health, his happiness, and he'd answer in vague clipped sentences. "Work's fine, Mom." "Yeah, we're good." "No, nothing new." I tried to dig deeper, to remind him that I was always there for him, but he seemed distracted, always glancing at his phone or checking the time. Sometimes, I'd hear my daughter-in-law's voice in the background, sharp and impatient, and he'd end the call abruptly. "Gotta go, Mom. Talk later." I confided in my husband, hoping he'd notice the same things, but he just shrugged. They're adults now. Let them live their lives. My daughter, on the other hand, was more blunt. "She doesn't like us, Mom. She's pulling him away." I wanted to defend my daughter-in-law, to believe the best, but the evidence was mounting. Family group chats went unanswered. Photos of their vacations appeared on social media, always. With her family, never with us. I felt like I was losing my son one silent day at a time. The worst part was the helplessness. I replayed every conversation, every gathering, searching for something I'd done wrong. Was I too involved? Not involved. Enough. Did I say something to offend her? The uncertainty gnawed at me, keeping me awake at night. I tried to reach out to bridge the gap, but every attempt was met with a wall of polite indifference. My son, once my confidant and friend, was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. One evening after another, ignored. Invitation, I sat alone in the living room scrolling through old photos of my son as a boy. The laughter, the hugs, the easy closeness sit, all felt like a different lifetime. I wondered if he missed it too, or if he was happier now, free from the ties of his old life. The thought broke my heart, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I just didn't know how wrong things would get to her, how much more I would lose before the truth finally came out. The day I learned my son was gone began like any other mundane. Unremarkable, the kind of day you never expect will end with your world collapsing. I was folding laundry when my phone rang, the screen lighting up with my daughter-in-law's name. My heart leaped, foolishly hopeful that maybe, finally, she was reaching out to reconnect. But her voice on the other end was flat, almost mechanical. "There's been an accident," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "He's gone." For a moment, I couldn't process her words. "What do you mean, he's gone?" asked, my voice trembling. "Where is he? What happened?" She sighed as if I were inconveniencing her. "He passed away. It's all you need to know." Asterisk, I felt the room spin around me. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the couch, clutching the phone as if it were a lifeline. "Please," I begged, "tell me what happened. Was it a car accident? Was he sick? I need to—" "No, please, I'm his mother." There was a long pause, and then she said, "It doesn't matter now. He's gone. I have things to take care of." The line went dead. I sat there in stunned silence, the phone pressed to my ear long after she'd hung up. My mind raced with questions. each one more frantic than the last. How could she be so cold? Why wouldn't she tell me anything? I called her back over and over, but she didn't answer. I left voicemails, my voice growing more desperate with each message. Please call me back. I need to know what happened. I need to see him, please. Hours passed with no response. I called my husband at work, my words tumbling out in a panicked rush. He tried to calm me, but I could hear the fear in his voice too. We called hospitals, police stations, anyone who might have answers, but no. One Kudor would tell us anything. It was as if my son had simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and a suffocating sense of dread. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every conversation, every missed sign, every moment I'd let slip by. I wondered if I could have done something, anything, to change the outcome. My daughter texted, frantic and heartbroken, demanding answers I didn't have. Our family group chat, once filled with jokes and updates, was now a string of unanswered please. The next morning, I tried again. I sent my daughter-in-law a message, my words raw and pleading. Please, I need to know when the funeral is. I need to say goodbye to my son. I waited, my hands shaking, my breath shallow. Minutes later, her reply appeared on the screen. He's long gone now. That was it. No details, no comfort, not even a time or place. Just those 4 words, as if my son's life and my grief meant nothing. I stared at the message, numb with disbelief. Could she be so heartless? How could she keep me from my own child's final goodbye? I tried to call her again, but she blocked my number. I reached out to her family, but they refused to speak to me. It was as if a wall had gone up overnight, shutting me out of my son's life and his death. The pain was unbearable, a raw, open wound that refused to heal. But beneath the grief, a new feeling began to take root. Suspicion. Why was she hiding the details? Why was she so determined to keep me away? I didn't know it yet, but the truth was even darker than I could have imagined. And I was about to discover just how deep the betrayal went. Grief is supposed to bring families together, or so I always believed. But in the days after my son's death, I learned that loss can also tear people apart in ways you never expect. The house felt emptier than ever, every room echoing with memories I could barely stand to face. I wandered from room to room, clutching his childhood photo, searching for some sign that this was all a nightmare I'd soon wake from. But the silence was relentless, and the reality was inescapable. At first, a husband tried to be strong for me, but I could see the cracks in his composure. He threw himself into work, coming home late and leaving early, as if staying busy could keep the pain at bay. My daughter, on the other hand, was furious. She called my daughter-in-law repeatedly, demanding answers, but was met with the same cold indifference I'd received. She hung up on me. "Mom," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "She won't even tell me where he's buried. What is she hiding?" The more we tried to reach out, the more isolated we became. My husband's side of the family, always a bit distant, offered their condolences, but quickly retreated into silence. Maybe she just needs space. My sister-in-law suggested, her tone cautious. It's a difficult time for everyone, but I could hear the doubt in her voice, the unspoken questions hanging between us. My own sister was more direct. "Something's not right here," she said. "You need to find out what really happened." Rumors began to swirl, whispered in hushed tones at family gatherings and in late-night phone calls. Some said my son had been sick for months. Others claimed it was a sudden accident. No one seemed to know for sure, and my daughter-in-law offered no clarification. She posted a single cryptic message on social media, "Rest in peace," and then disappeared, blocking us from her accounts. Friends who tried to reach out to her were met with silence or curt replies. The more she withdrew, the more suspicious her behavior seemed. I found myself replaying every interaction with her, searching for clues I might have missed. Had she always been this cold? Or had something changed? I remembered the way she'd bristled at family gatherings, the way my son had grown quieter, more withdrawn. I wondered if he'd tried to reach out, if he'd been suffering in silence. The guilt was overwhelming, a constant ache in my chest. As the days passed, the divide in our family grew sharper. Some relatives urged me to let it go, to accept that my son was gone and move on. "You're only hurting yourself," my cousin said gently. Dwelling on this won't bring him back. But others rallied around me, determined to uncover the truth. My daughter became my fiercest ally, combing through public records, reaching out to old friends, refusing to let the matter rest. "We deserve answers, Mom," she insisted. "He deserves better than this." The contrast between those who supported me and those who distanced themselves was stark. I felt abandoned by some, but fiercely grateful for the loyalty of others. Still, the isolation was suffocating. I stopped answering the phone, stopped going out, afraid of the pitying looks and awkward questions. My grief was compounded by a growing sense of betrayal, not just from my daughter-in-law, but from anyone who told me to let go. Late at night, I would sit in the darkness, replaying my son's last words to me, searching for hidden meaning. I wondered if he'd known what was coming, if he'd tried to warn me in some way. The pain was raw, but beneath it, a new determination began to take shape. I couldn't let his memory be erased, couldn't let the truth be buried with him. My daughter-in-law's behavior was too suspicious, her silence too calculated. I knew I had to keep searching, no matter how alone I felt. And so, as the world moved on without him, I made a silent promise to my son. I would not rest until I knew the truth, even if it meant facing secrets I wasn't ready to hear, even if it meant losing more than I already had. I woke up one morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The grief was still there, heavy and unyielding, but it was joined by something sharper, a need for answers that refused to be silenced. I realized I couldn't keep waiting for the truth to come to me. If I wanted to honor my son, I had to fight for him, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. I started with his friends, reaching out to anyone who might have seen him in those final weeks. Some were surprised to hear from me, their voices tinged with awkward sympathy, but a few were willing to talk. One friend, Mark, hesitated before telling me he seemed off, lately, tired. He stopped coming out with us, said he was busy at home. Another, Sarah, confided that she'd tried to visit, but my daughter-in-law always made excuses. She said he was sick but wouldn't let me see him. I thought it was strange, but I didn't want to pry. The more I heard, the more unsettled. I called the hospital, desperate for any record of my son's last days, but they had nothing. No admissions, no emergency visits. It was as if he'd simply vanished from the world. I tried the police, explaining my fears, but they told me there was no open investigation, no report of suspicious circumstances. I could hear the skepticism in their voices, the unspoken suggestion that I was just a grieving mother unable to accept reality, but I refused to give up. I combed through public records, searching for any mention of my son's name. That's when I found it, a brief, impersonal notice of cremation, signed by my daughter-in-law. No funeral, no obituary. No chance for family or friends to say goodbye. My hands shook as I read the document, the finality of it hitting me like a physical blow. She'd made all the decisions, shut us out completely, and erased any trace of him from the world. Fueled by anger and heartbreak, I reached out to her old neighbors, hoping someone had seen or heard something. One neighbor, Mrs. Patel, remembered hearing arguments late at night. "He sounded so sad," she said quietly. "I wish I'd done something." Another neighbor mentioned seeing my son looking thin and pale, barely leaving the house. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of isolation and suffering I hadn't wanted to imagine. I gathered everything I'd learned, every message, every memory, every scrap of evidence, sat down at my kitchen table, my resolve hardening. My daughter-in-law had taken my son from me once, but I wouldn't let her take the truth as well. I knew what I had to do. I would confront her face to face and demand the answers I deserved. As I dialed her number one last time, my heart pounded with fear and anticipation. I didn't know what she would say or what secrets she might still be hiding, but I was done being silent. I was ready to face whatever came next, no matter how painful, because what I was about to learn would change everything, not just for me, but for everyone who loved my son. Asterisk. When my daughter-in-law finally agreed to meet, it was in a sterile coffee shop across town, far from the home that once held my son's laughter. I arrived early, my hands trembling as I clutched a folder of notes and questions. She walked in late, her face expressionless, eyes cold and guarded. For a moment, I saw the young woman my son had fallen in love with, But that image vanished as soon as she sat down. "I want answers," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I deserve to know what happened to my son." She looked away, her jaw tight. He was sick, depressed. He didn't want anyone to know. I pressed on, refusing to let her deflect. "Why didn't you tell us? Why did you keep us away? Why was there no funeral, no goodbye?" Her eyes flashed with something anger, maybe, or guilt. "He asked me not to. He didn't want pity. He wanted it to be quiet." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "That doesn't sound like him. He loved his family. He would never have wanted to disappear like this." For a moment, she faltered. Her hands twisted in her lap, and I saw a crack in her armor. "He changed after we got married. He was different. I tried to help, but he pushed me away. I didn't know what else to do." The pain in her voice was real, but it didn't erase the choices she'd made. "You could have called us. You could have let us say goodbye." She looked at me then, her eyes rimmed with red. "I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting him. I thought I was doing what he wanted. Maybe I was wrong." The truth was messier than I'd imagined. No single villain, just a web of pain, pride, and misunderstanding. My anger softened, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. I realized that seeking justice wouldn't bring my son back, and forgiveness wouldn't erase the hurt. But I could choose closure. I could choose to honor his memory by letting go of the bitterness that threatened to consume me. We sat in silence for a long time. Two women bound by love and loss, both forever changed. When I finally stood to leave, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I would never have the answers I wanted, but I had the truth I needed. My son had been loved, even in his darkest moments, and his story would not end in silence. In the weeks that followed, I found support in unexpected places. Old friends reached out, sharing memories and stories I'd never heard. My daughter became my anchor, her determination and love pulling me back from the edge. Even some family members who had distanced themselves returned, offering quiet comfort and understanding that life would never be the same. But I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. I learned that healing isn't about forgetting or pretending the pain never existed. It's about finding meaning in the loss and allowing yourself to move forward. My son's absence would always ache, but his love would always remain. And as I looked around at the people who stood by me, I realized that even in the darkest moments, there is hope. There is connection. There is the possibility of peace. Looking back, I never could have imagined the path my life would take after losing my son. Grief, I've learned, is not a straight line. It's a winding road full of sharp turns and unexpected detours. There were days when the pain felt unbearable, when anger and confusion threatened to swallow me whole. But through it all, I discovered something I never expected: the power to survive and even to grow. I've learned that love doesn't end with loss. My son's absence is a wound that will never fully heal. But the love I have for him is still here, woven into every memory, every lesson, every quiet moment of reflection. I've also learned that boundaries are not just about protecting ourselves from others, they're about honoring our own needs, our own truths. For too long, I let guilt and fear keep me silent, but I know now that my voice matters. I deserved answers, and I deserved to be heard. If you're listening to my story and you've felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of unanswered questions, or the loneliness of grief, I want you to know you're not alone. Your pain is real and your journey is valid. It's okay to demand the truth, to seek closure, and to protect your heart even when it feels impossible. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding the courage to keep living, to keep loving, and to keep hoping. I found strength in the people who stood by me, and in the small acts of kindness that reminded me I wasn't alone. I found peace in letting go of bitterness, and in choosing to remember my son for the joy he brought into my life, not just the pain of his loss. If you're still searching for answers or struggling to move forward, I hope my story gives you the courage to keep going, because even in the darkest moments, there is always a way through. And sometimes, the most powerful stories of resilience are the ones we're still writing. Stay with me, there's more to come.